my name is Virginia Carrera. I'm doing an internship survey. So I'm a student in Missouri, University of Missouri, Columbia. Um, I'm doing a survey called Need Assessment to get to know what Columbia needs and what people would need. With me, I would like to welcome you to our radio
Podcast. Podcast.
podcast. Mr. Julian, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, most definitely. My name is Julian Jackman. I am 49.
Ooh.
I think that's right. I might be wrong. But that's crazy. I don't know my own age. Um,
You
born
don't
and
look
raised.
any older than 20.
Thank you.
Yep.
Born and raised here in Columbia, Missouri. Graduate of Rockbridge High School. I am also the executive director of Peace, People Embracing Another Choice Effectively. I'm also the co-executive director of the Peace and Hope Center for Youth. I'm also co-owner of Rise Initiative LLC. I'm also the owner of Agents of Change and the owner of Jewett Investments here
Look
in
at
Columbia, Missouri.
you making the change.
Definitely, trying to put some dents in social demands and social emotional demands for children here in Columbia. Most definitely, yes.
That's nice. And this is also similar topic that I want to talk about. The topic I do want to focus on for today, it would be around mental health and crime related growing up in Colombia since you have been here for a while.
Yes.
Okay, let's start. Um, how would you describe the safety of your neighborhood you grew up in, and like what would be the biggest concern for you and your family?
So growing up in Columbia, you're talking about the 70s and the 80s,
Yeah.
and early 90s. It was actually safe. Um, we had bad things that would happen and go on in certain neighborhoods,
Yeah.
but for the most part, Columbia was very safe. It was more of a community for real back then. It was definitely a village that was helped raising the kids here in Columbia. Now, it was up to us kids if we wanted to listen or not. So for me, I wasn't a good listener when it came to listening to the elders and the adults around me. But for the most part, growing up in Columbia was actually very safe.
That's nice. What do you think like made it started being worse?
So really, what we started seeing was the growing population of people coming from bigger cities, wanting to come here to safe Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
So they're exiting St. Louis, exiting Kansas City, exiting Memphis, and these cities that had really high crime rates. Some of them sometimes murder capital of the nations, at times taking place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they would come here to escape all that, but was still bringing that chaos and that madness to Columbia. And the more and more they came, the more and more of the influence they started having on the population here in Columbia.
Growing up, were there any areas in your community like you or your parents would say like, hey, don't go around that area because there is crime or unsafe? And if so, like, how did it impact your life?
Uh, there really wasn't main areas. It was, I think for me, it was like, hey, if you're going to be at Columbia Square, because our family was well known and people knew who I was, and it was one of those things like, hey, just be careful.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be a follower. Don't you? So they're more worried about me, doing something wrong and bad rather than the people that were around me because they knew, this could be an opportunity for him to follow someone doing something dumb. So you be careful while you're there. Like they knew it was bad, but they knew I would still be safe, right? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. It does.
So when I'd be in those areas, Indian Hills, when I go out there to see family, it was one of those things like, hey, be careful while you're out there. Don't do nothing stupid. It was like, that was the kind of pep talk I would get from my parents, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it was really areas that we watched out for, don't be around or don't do this or don't do that. I think more the concern that my mom and dad, who weren't together, I would say would be after certain hours. I had to learn that growing up. Back then, you want to be out at night. That's when everybody else is out, they're partying, having a good time, socializing. And I wanted to be a part of that. And it took me becoming older to understand, I get what they mean by, hey, ain't nothing good going on after midnight, right? So at that time, that's when I would see a lot of stuff happening in Colombia. Um, you would see more of the violence, you would see more of the drug use, stuff like that after certain hours at night. Even though it was still going on during the day, it just wasn't as much at night. Like night was like the cover, to do these things in Colombia. So for me, it was certain hours at night, is when my parents would have those concerns. Like, man, you really need to be careful if you're going to be out during this time.
Mm-hmm. What about now? Like, would you let your daughter out around those area by herself? Um, like, let's say, like, before you said it was much safer, right? So in this situation, at least to the 2024, well, in this situation, would you still let your daughter out, or, you know what I mean?
Right. Uh, no, I didn't. I didn't because times have changed. Now you're seeing that trend of 10 to 18 years old that are committing violent crimes, that are getting caught with the guns and doing silly stuff, right? So my daughter's only 20, so I definitely wouldn't let her do certain things, and would have that talk with her. Like, hey, no, I don't want you out during this time because XYZ could happen. No, I don't want you hanging out at because the last shooting that happened was over here. You don't know who's going to retaliate. You don't know what's going to. And those are the things that I feared for with my daughter because it's a whole different time now. And these kids will shoot first and ask questions later. That has concerns for me, especially if my daughter is hanging around some of these young men that are involved in stuff like this and her not understanding the consequences, the life consequences of being around this kind of lifestyle.
Um, like growing up, did you had any resources like our organization? Did you had any organization that would help you go to the right path, or wasn't there much for the kiddos?
It's crazy that you asked that because, man, Colombia is so rich with resources. Even today, we are still rich with resources. Today is different because now we work out of silos. Back then, it wasn't. Back then, you saw churches that organized with organizations that organized with organizations to make sure that kids were being enriched. We're getting the things that we needed, right? You had the Blind Boon Center right down around the corner. My dad, he used to be the one that opened up the gym at Douglas. So we had things that we could go to and be involved in. We had roller skating rinks. I mean, we had things we could do. We had an ice skating rink in Columbia, right? We had things we could do and be involved with, arcades. We had so many different things that we could be involved with, and all of those are gone. All of them are gone. The resources that we had to keep a young person engaged is just not there in Columbia no more. But back when I was growing up, they was there. And I tell people all the time, it was my fault for not engaging in a lot of those resources. But I was definitely trying to be something that I did not need to be. And to be in the situations that I was putting myself into, I couldn't be around churches, right? I couldn't be around someone who's going to tell me something right to do. I definitely wasn't going to be involved with any organization or church that was doing anything with the police or anything like that. So I scorned those different institutions because of the lifestyle that I was living. But it was still rich in resources if I wanted to have those resources and partake in them.
What do you think like stopped you from wanting to take those resources?
For me, is I didn't want somebody to stop me. You know, when someone is
Would
doing
you
wrong.
blame the age or the friends group we were with?
Oh, definitely the friend group. Definitely the friend group. If I would have had that opportunity to be around the right people, I knew I would have had that influence. And there's no way I want to stop doing what I was doing. See, it's hard for people to admit that. I admit it. I wanted to do those things that was wrong. And for me to keep doing it, I knew I could be around somebody who's going to tell me, man, that's not good for you. Let me give you something else. Let me give you another option. I didn't want to hear that. All right, so I kept doing what I was doing, And ultimately, it led me in prison. I did 17 years in prison because of following and letting other people influence my decisions instead of myself doing it.
How was it like since we are talking about prison? How was it inside?
Horrible,
Horrible.
horrible. Uh, to be, and I can't say to be taken away because I voluntarily chose to make the choices that I made that put me in prison. But to be taken away from your family, um, to be stripped of your dignity, to be stripped of your manhood, uh, just things taken away from you to break you down to the bare essence of feeling like you're nothing, not good, not good. Um, but I tell people this all the time, prison saved my life. I had to go see those things to have an understanding of what I did not want in my life. I don't want prison in my life. I don't want to be away from my kids. I don't want to be away from my wife. I want them around. I want to be in their life. So that means I need to do something different. So I had to go to prison to figure that out.
That's good. I'm glad. But I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Saying it by heart. What about like resources such as like parks and all? Were they cleaner than what it is now?
There is, again, that community
Mm-hmm.
that we had back then was just totally different. I remember after having uh, things in the park that we would do and parents getting together and say, all right, kids, let's clean up the park. And as a family and as a whole, as a community, we would clean up the park.
That's also a fun thing.
And it was a fun thing to do, man, to make sure that the park was clean for the next people that came through to use it, right?
Yeah.
It meant something. It felt like there was ownership, that it was ours. This is our park. Let's take care of it. And you see now that it's not like that. People don't think like that no more.
No.
They don't care. So then, yeah, it was a lot different. There was more involvement. There was more of, like I said, a sense of, man, this is our park. This is Columbia. This is ours. Let's take care of it. Even Parks and Rec that comes around and has their own cleaning crew. I remember how they would be like, man, this is awesome. We didn't have to do that much because you guys cleaned it already. All we got to do is take the trash out. So definitely a whole different time, different era now between then and now. So yeah.
Since we're talking about the community, what do you think the community situation is right now?
Uh, again, you're seeing a community that's working out of silos, no one coming together to unite. Um, and here's what saddens me is that I feel like a lot of the organizations and churches are not thinking about the bigger picture, and that's our youth. Our youth is the future of Columbia. They're our future mayors, our lawyers, our doctors, our nurses, our teachers. They are our future, right? Whatever you can think of that's going to be happening in Columbia in the future, they're next up. And if you like what you're seeing with our kiddos right now, you got to be saying our future is doomed. If you're not taking part in trying to change that, you're not looking at the bigger picture. So you can't continue to work in your own little tiny space thinking you're going to change Columbia without using organizations like ours, without using certain churches that are in these neighborhoods. You got to use them. But even when I look at the churches now, when I go visit them, the population in the church is super duper low, right? You see a lot of the elders, but you don't see no young people in the churches no more. So it's getting scary to think about the future of cities because it's dwindling. The people that took the time to make sure there was community is it is like if you look at those populations now in those silos, it's bad. It's bad.
I agree. Even though like same, I agree. Like back in Nepal too, like before, I think people worked a lot as a team. Like growing up, and like now, if I look back, nobody cares about each other, and that's not a good thing. You need the neighbor. You need to know who is next door. Right now, probably even my own house next door, I'm not sure if I know that person or not.
Right.
Like that's how distant we have become, and that's really not good.
It's not. It's not good at all.
No, because we need each other, and we may not need each other now at the moment, but eventually teamwork. That's how like everybody is involved, you know.
That's right.
That's it. Um, let's talk about how you coped with your thing. Coped with it. Like, how did you, like, let's say, did you ever feel like you had like a special task that like you would want to do in a safe space type of thing? Did you have somewhere to go for your safe place?
No,
No.
and I think that's the problem that a lot of our kids are even having today. Um, and this goes all the way to generational trauma. So I was raised by a single parent.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was in and out of jail and prison. Um, we did not have that close father-son relationship. I always yearned for it, but never got it because he didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't know how to get it because he didn't have it. So I found myself not ever feeling comfortable or safe anywhere I was except for one place. That was my grandma's house. If I wanted to go somewhere and truly relax, truly feel like the world wasn't beating down my door, I would go to grandma's house. That's where I felt refuge. That's where I felt, hey, this is a safe place. I can be me. I can be myself. I can let my mask off, and I can be me. And I didn't have that nowhere but there. Truth be told, not even in my own house with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't take nothing away from my mom. She did what she could, did the best of what she had. Um, but I still did not feel safe in that environment either. And that's not good for a child not to feel safe of where he calls home. Um, so yeah, I had an issue with that. But again, my mom had me when she was young. And I really think it was just a part of her not understanding certain things about parenting. Um, so we had some generational trauma, and I think that happens a lot of times um, in marginalized communities. Kids are having kids. People are handing down that knowledge or information about how to be a good parent. So you try to do what you think is right, and most of the times you get it wrong. And I look at my parents now, and it's funny because they are the best grandparents in the world. And I know why now. I get it because I'm the best grandparent in the world now, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Because I did so many things wrong with my own kids. I learned from those mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know what to do. So it's funny when my kids are like, man, you know everything. It's like, really, I don't. You guys helped me learn everything that I know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's like that for a lot of people, but I just think it was a more harsh environment in marginalized or low income areas, especially in Colombia. I think it's harder on the kiddos to have that safe place.
Same scenario, but like now, let's say, what do you think could have been better to make you feel safer when you were growing up?
Again, I'll go back to the rearing of a child. I think if there's more resources handed out to my mom and to my dad, more education for them about how to parent, I think probably things probably could have been different if they were given better opportunities of employment. Um, the list could go on, right? When you're poor, you're poor. It is what it is. When you're poor, you're poor. Um, but I can say this, like I said, my mom did good, for what she had. It could have been worse. I had friends that I would look at and be like, oh Lord, there's no way I could live like that. But I would still go home to something bad myself, right? Like, it could be better, right? So it's one of those things that, I try not to complain too much about it because no matter what the meal was, my mom had something in front of us at night to eat.
And that's special.
It is. And, as I got older, um, did I try to help contribute to the household? Yes, I did. Um, at such a young age, you shouldn't be in survival mode. You shouldn't feel like you have to help, your mom with feeding, right? Or making sure you got something to eat, making sure the lights are on, making sure rent's paid. you shouldn't have to worry about things like that as a child. That added to my environment of being, hey, you're in survivor mode, man. You got to make sure this happens because if mom doesn't have it, you ain't got it. When I made sense of that reality, man, I was out there. I had to make it happen.
Um, let's talk about Columbia Police. What do you think they're doing? Like how are they reacting to situations like crime? Let's say there is a gunshot in even Columbia Square, let's say, right? How would they react, and how hard have they been reacting?
So I think being a police officer is probably one of the hardest jobs in the world you could have. You're faced in a situation where a lot of people's not gonna like you because of what you do, but it's because they don't understand what you're doing. And the main understanding, and I think that the public and the community needs to understand, is they are here for your safety.
Yep.
So I want my police officers to act in a way as if they understand they are serving the public. That is their job. Instead of, when they come to situations like this, it almost feels like that community is already being judged because of things that is happening there prior to whatever just happened. So when they enter into a situation like this, there's already this bad stigmatism about that area, and I don't think they're going in a situation non-judgmental. I want them to be able to come in these situations and be able to help as much as they can. But because that has not happened, and that's on the community's side too, right? They're not helping the police either. So what happens is these barriers have been erected and they can't get past this on either side. So that's one thing I can say that I work hard to it doing, is showing my town that I grew up in to say, hey, give them a chance, because these are the people that are trying to save your life. Like when you run away from situations, they run to them. That's tough on somebody to be able to do that, right? But I want them to do it knowing that the community has their back. They're supporting them. So to be able to do that, what needs to happen is when we're talking about situations like this, especially when the city does it or the police do it, they need to have the true stakeholders sitting down with them. The community should be sitting down with them and discussing these matters. And so that's when I say we work in silos, that's what I mean. So when the Columbia Police Department is talking to the city about crime and what's going on prevention-wise, what can we do to be proactive, not reactive, I don't see people from the actual city sitting down with them from those communities and saying, hey, this is what's happening in Bear Creek. This is what's happening in Columbia Square. This is what's happening in Indian Hills. This is what's happening on Demerit. This is what's happening on the Key. Help us. You need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. Help us. So you're not seeing the stakeholders involved in these conversations, and that's what I want to see more of. And that's what I've been really working hard towards, is saying, hey, when we sit down now, can I please have representatives from each of these neighborhoods sitting down with us, so when we talk, we're just not talking about them, we're talking with them. So yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah. Growing up, or and were there any violence or like neighborhood, like anything like that that's happening that's directly affected you or your family?
It's crazy because I've had a few friends that were murdered when I was young. One, you might have said it was like, it was a fight, something went bad, and this was the outcome. Another one was he was flat out murdered. I mean, there was things going on, but it wasn't as much as it is now. Now you could have someone get murdered this weekend, and then the next weekend we have a whole nother murder.
True.
And then right after that, probably that next day, something else is happening. It's like Columbia's never been like that, right? It hasn't been that bad. Even if you look at the stats from back then till now, you'd be like, whoa, what in the hell happened? It's a big dramatic change. So So to me, to compare is hard because again, like I said in Columbia, I felt safe back then. You're talking about I could be at grandma's house or even at my house. Let's say if I was at my house, right?
Mm-hmm.
210 Hickman Avenue, right in the heart of the city. I could be sleeping on the living room floor, door wide open, not locked. My mom and stepdad might have their cars unlocked right in front of the house. We didn't have to worry about nothing.
Mm-hmm.
There was no worries back then. No one's going to come in the house and do something to us. No one's going to mess with our vehicles. It was not like that. Things have changed now. You go into the house now, the screen door is locked, your deadbolt's locked, the lock is locked, alarm comes on, your car alarm is on outside sitting in front of the house. I mean,
Gotta make sure
you
everything.
gotta make sure. You have to make sure. And I'm telling you, things have changed.
It really has.
Yes,
Wasn't there a shooting a few days ago too, somewhere in Colombia?
yes.
Near the.
And again, all young kids,
Mm-hmm.
18 and under.
What do you think goes on their mind since we're talking about this shooting? Like when, like we are doing things we are not supposed to. What do you think is going on their mind?
You know, for this group of kids that I know,
Mm-hmm.
which is sad. Um, I'm gonna say, you know, for them there is no excuses because they have been given opportunities. They know that there's people out there and resources that want to support them and love them.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's keeping up with the Joneses. You know, I want this because I want to look like this. I want this status because it's going to make me look like this. Um, and I blame a lot of that for real on social media. I'm not going to lie to you. I think social media is horrible. And they do an injustice with our kids. I mean, because they're seeing this stuff and they think it can be them. And they're not reading the small print for promotional use only, right? They don't understand that these people might not be living the way they're saying they're living.
Oh, of course not.
They might not be doing the things that they're saying they're doing out in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And they put this on our kids, and our kids go out and try to do the things that they're saying, and they're finding out, oh man, dude was lying. Well, it's too late now.
Of course.
It's too late because now you're facing a murder charge, you're facing a robbery charge, and you know now that guy was lying, but it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
It's too late. So it's just sad because I really think you have that going on, and then you just have some kids that it's really survival mode. Like they're gonna eat. I'm gonna make sure I get a roof over my head. I'm gonna make sure I got a car to drive. I mean, they're going through these different stages of trying to make sure that they're surviving on the streets. But I see more of it being an image. Let me be something that I really, really don't understand what I'm trying to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then they don't understand it because they don't understand consequences. They know right from wrong, but they really don't understand consequences. And when something happens to them, then they get to figure out, oh God, I don't get to choose the consequence. Someone's getting ready to choose that for me. And it's gonna probably be bad because I did something bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's again, it's one of those ones where it's like, man, this is tough. It's tough, but I really think a lot of it is social media and survival.
Um, the topic mental health itself, I feel like we don't talk about it enough. Because mental health is not just one thing, you know, it has to do almost with whatever we do.
Yes.
Everyday decision we make, how we think to how we feel, it's all connected. And I think we don't talk about that enough with people, especially like, let's say, oh, that person is laughing, he's probably okay, but you don't know what's going on deep inside. I think that's where we lose the special touch of each other, where I think still like being with each other is very important. This is where it comes up, because just because that person's smiling doesn't mean that person is okay.
That's right.
I think we are so good at faking nowadays, especially in our generation right now. There's so much trauma going on, like generation trauma maybe, or even like breakups to anything, little things that can make a big deal for that person. And that's how they think when they're reacting to this situation, you know?
Most definitely.
And
Most definitely.
this is why I always think we always need to check up on our friends, check up on family members, how they're doing. you don't need to have a long conversation. Just check up it once a while, you know? You never know when your high might save somebody's life.
That's right. That's
Mm-hmm.
right. And it's sad because in the black community,
Mm-hmm.
to speak about mental health used to be very taboo. You don't bring it up. They're not crazy.
Yeah.
Ain't nothing wrong with him. And it's like, whoa. Well, if I understood, I wish I understood some things back then like I do now.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I look at it now, it's like, man, my family was troubled. There's a lot of mental health issues. No one wanted to talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
No one wanted to warn us. Uh, no one got us help. And you see a little bit of that now, but now you're starting to see schools getting into the mental health to where they're offering support, not only for the child, but also for family. Do I think they need to get out there more?
Yeah.
I really think they do. Um, but it's hard to get through um, a culture. Our culture says you don't talk to psychiatrists, you don't talk to a therapist, you damn sure don't take no meds for something, right? And that's how I was raised, right?
Same.
But I had mental health in my family. Got a schizophrenic uncle, right? I saw some things like, well, what about him? He's different. What? Right? So they really think it's taboo to talk about these things.
Mm-hmm.
But really, when we go now and we're talking with families, they're more open now to the fact of saying, hey, you might need to talk to a therapist. This might be beneficial.
That's good.
These are the ways that can help. So we see the doors are starting to open. But
Still, there's a lot more doors that needs to be opened.
a lot more doors that need to be open for mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that mental health agencies are really doing a good job of not making it look so scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their technique now of approaching families like this is better now. So I think if they continue this trend of really working on how they introduce themselves into the community, how they introduce themselves to a family, and how they want to help them, I think those doors will continue to open.
Yep, me too. Growing up, we didn't talk about mental health. Like, if let's say somebody is acting some way, we would call it, oh, he's crazy. He's just like that. That's how he acts. Or like, even autism, or like those kind of, like, childhood trauma, anything like that. Like, if a kid is acting weird, oh, he's just weird. That's a crazy kid. We never thought of it. And I think this kid might be special. This kid might have autism. We never talked about those things.
Same
And
here.
yep, I think like there's so much more we still need to learn and accept. And the fact that people don't accept is also a thing, I think. Like, they don't want to accept that they need help. And I think, like, even looking at our kiddos or any other kids, like, I think they know they need help. They have feelings, but deep down they don't want to get, like, accepting it because they feel that it's weakness. It's not weak to ask for help.
That's right. That's right.
I think that's how I like when I'm looking at them. That's how I feel that they're feeling. I know some don't want to accept therapy because, oh, it's not for man. That's not true.
That's right.
That's
right.
not true at all.
I agree.
It's for everybody.
It's for everybody. That's right.
Man, woman, old, age, young, everybody. It doesn't have an age.
That's right.
And I want to say it out loud to people to get help. Because I know asking help is difficult. I totally agree. But it's very important. Also, saying no is difficult, but we need to say no.
Yes.
It's off topic, but that's very important.
Yes.
Okay, let's come back a little bit.
Yes.
Let's talk about turning points. What do you think was your turning point of, oh no, I need to make a better life decision?
For me, it goes to the case that I was involved in,
Mm-hmm.
that I was convicted of. Um, so in my case, a man lost his life. Um, and I remember going through this process, so worried about me, so worried about my family and what they were going to go through losing me. And once the court processes started happening, and I started seeing his family, started reading the victim impact statements, and learning that this man was a father, a grandfather, an uncle, a cousin, and realizing how hurt his family was because of the choice that I made. Um, that was definitely probably the biggest turning point for me, and probably one of the biggest motivations that I have for why I do what I do. When I wake up and I think about this man's family and what I did to it, that hurts. Because what would my kids do without me? What would my wife do without me? To think that someone could violently take me away from them, and that hurt is forever. It's not going to ever go away. There's no way I could ever make them whole again. There's no way that I could say sorry. So the next best thing I can do is pay it forward to make sure that whoever crosses my path doesn't hurt anybody the way I did. And that's why I do what I do. That was my biggest turning point, was understanding the hurt that I caused, and not ever wanting anybody to feel that way again at my hands.
Um, were there any people in or programs that help you towards, like, let's say, like after you decide I want to make a change, were you helped, or like was it just you being inside was?
Oh no, it was a process. It was a process. Uh, you cannot change or heal what you do not acknowledge.
Yeah.
So for me, I took a class called Impact of Crime on Victims class, uh, and that's the class that started me facilitating and writing programs for the Missouri Department of Corrections. But while I was taking this class, and it was bringing awareness to victims and what victims go through and different crimes perpetrated on them. They have a victims panel that comes in, right? They don't tell you about this. Just one day they say, hey, we're not having class today. We're going down here to the gymnasium. We're going to have some people talk to us. And lo and behold, it was victims that have been victimized, right? And mine happened to be an organization called Parents of Murdered Children. So it was all these women talking about how their kids were murdered. And I remember standing there, man, and listening to them talk, and they could see that I was bothered. And I tried to get up and go to the bathroom because I wanted to go to the bathroom and actually cry, right? I didn't want to do it in front of this whole group of men, right? I'm trying to get the hell away from them. And I remember I stood up and asked, the lady who's the director right now with the program, I said, hey, can I go to the restroom? And as I'm making my way to the restroom, they stopped me. Hey, young man. I was young then. I was in my 20s.
You still look like one, I told you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So they stopped me and said, hey, where are you going? We don't want you to miss none of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I need to go to the restroom. And I remember this lady, and I'm still friends with her now. We talk all the time.
Yeah.
And she was like, this bothers you, doesn't it? And I said, yes, ma'am, it does. She goes, if you don't mind, can you tell me why you're here? And I told her, and once I told her, she goes, is this why it bothers you?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yes, ma'am, it does. I don't even want to talk to you no more, like I need to leave. She's like, no, I want you to talk about it because now I know you're human and you have a heart. And I broke down.
Oh.
I broke down in front of God and everybody. I broke down. And it was really, really cool. They made me sit with them up front. And I had these old women pat me on the back and talking to me while the other ones were still talking to the other guys. And it was pretty cool because they gave me a fine understanding of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole time that I'm doing time, I'm thinking that there's no way I could ever be forgiven of the things that I have done until I cross their path. And I remember them saying, if you don't like the way this feels, then make sure nobody else feels or hurt or you're hurt again.
That's deep.
Right. And man, I was on fire. I was on fire after that. from that day on, my life was forever changed. Um, and I'm telling you, without those things happening, again, prison saving my life, if those things didn't happen, I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing right now. But because they did, I know that's my purpose. I needed these things to happen to understand what I need to do in this world. Um, yes, I'm very sorry that someone lost his life. I'm very sorry that there's a family that I could never be able to mend. I'm so sorry that I did this to my community. Like, I wrote a letter to my community before getting out of prison because this is how bad I felt, but also promising what I was going to do for my community when I came home. And I'm going to stand on that.
Are you connected with that family?
No, no, I'm not. I'm not.
It's probably illegal.
It's not that it's illegal. It's just the ball is in their court. Uh, I definitely wrote letters through. Um, you have different things that you got to do, right? If you want to speak to a victim or anything like that. So I had to write through a victim's advocacy for the state of Missouri. So I've sent them a letter, and it's one thing I used to teach in prison, how to write letters to your victims. So it's a letter that you don't have to put a lot in. Um, they don't need to know what you're doing or how you're doing it. They don't need to know certain things about you. What they need to understand is that you're sorry for what you did to them, right? And that's it. And that's all. And they give them the option of writing back or communicating with you. That particular family did not, and that's okay. That's okay. I know what I need to do, and that's what matters to me. And whether they see what I'm doing or hear what I'm doing, doesn't matter to me anyway. What matters to me is that I'm doing the right next thing to make sure that somebody like them don't have to go through what they went through anymore. And that's what it's about. So
you're doing the best you can do.
That's it. That's it.
What do you think our community need to do better in, like, let's say 5 years from now? What the situation is right now? What do you think? How can we improve it in, like, a term of 5 years?
So, now you're talking about local government agencies, organizations, churches, community leaders, grassroots organizations. Now you're saying we're all coming together. We all stand in one accord, and we work as a unit in each neighborhood. We know who the kids are. We know who the families are. We know who the teachers are. We know everything, and we work with everybody. That is the only way. That is the only way 5 years from now we get it together and you see some progress.
Not impossible,
but
it's
possible.
It's difficult.
It's possible. It's difficult.
It's difficult, not impossible.
Difficult.
Sorry for my words choices.
I'm
Maybe 10 years.
It feels impossible.
It feels impossible.
It feels impossible.
Because right now we are trying to. A few days ago, I was trying to communicate with somebody, and it was difficult to take the first step even to help them. So, being able to collect all these organizations just in one room is next to impossible.
Yes. Yes.
So, yes, if everybody comes on the same boat, it is very much likely we can change. I agree, Columbia is not as bad as St. Louis, but it's getting on the same boat.
Oh, most definitely. If we don't start doing something 5 years from now, we'll look like Kansas City, St. Louis. So that's the issue that we have. In 5 years, if we're not doing what I'm talking about doing, we can say, hey, here's little St. Louis, here's little Kansas City. It can truly be that if we don't start doing something now with getting everybody together as one unit.
Cause right now, like every day in news, there's somebody dying, or there's a shooting, or there's robbery.
Yeah.
Right next to my house yesterday.
Wow. Wow.
It's not safe to even go home.
All right. And you know, and that's what it does. You know, it takes away your security,
Mhm.
right? When you see things happen that close to you, because now it's like, wow, it's happening even here where I'm at. And when you
Supposed
start
to be
feeling,
a safe
it's supposed to be a
community.
safe community, right? You're supposed to feel safe in your house.
Mhm.
And when that happens, you don't. You don't. But I really say that neighborhoods or communities, we got to start coming together. We have to start working with our local government. We have to start making sure that we're putting the right people in place to make sure that things are happening in our city that needs to happen, right? Someone was talking to me about this presidential election. I said, hey, that is what it is. I'm worried about our local government.
Yep.
What's going on with our city council? What's going on with our senators and House representatives and our governor, right? I'm worried about that, right?
Mhm.
Because that's what's going to dictate what happens in my community. You know, okay, so we got a new president coming. Huh? What's going to happen with this new governor we got coming, right? What's going to happen, you know, when we're going and voting for our new city council members and our new mayor? And so those are the things that I worry about because I need to make sure that whatever's going on around here is going to help me be successful with what I'm trying to do with the communities that I work with.
Mhm. Let's say you spoke with somebody who has actually power, local leaders, right? What would, and you tell your story growing up, what do you think you would tell that person to this would make our community safer, or like how can we work together? Like what advice would you give?
So I'm already doing that. And it's pretty much what I just said.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, how do we sit down with the true stakeholders? So, you know, if you doing a survey is actually a part of the data that we want to be able to use
Mm-hmm.
to take to them and say, hey, this is why they need to be sitting at the table. Um, I don't care what you thought about them. They might not have the education that you have. They might not have gone to college, but they're the ones that's living in the environment that you say you want to change.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't talk to them about how to make those changes, because they've been in Old Columbia and they've been in New Columbia. And like I said, they know there's a drastic difference in what Columbia used to be like. So how do we get it back to where everybody is on one accord working together? Well, back then they went to the community and the community was heavily involved. It has to start happening again. The stakeholders are the community members that live in those neighborhoods. They have to be sitting at the table when you're making a decision for them.
I would agree. Because we can't make a change without those people being involved. We can't say, hey, this person needs this without that person actually being there saying, this is what I need. We can only assume this is what they need based on what we are saying. But deep down, we don't know. They might need job more than what they are needing right now.
That's right.
They might need food more than clothes, let's say. You know?
That's right.
We can only assume, but we can only help on this and until they're there to make the change.
Very true. Very true.
What advice would you give to young men and women growing up and facing the same scenario, challenges as you? What advice would you give?
This is funny because I always say, man, I used to hear this advice and I didn't listen to that advice. I had to find out for myself, and that's gonna ring true even today. You know, I can say things till I'm blue in the face, but I know there's just some kids out there, they got to experience it for themselves. I can tell them the stove is hot. Sometimes they want to reach out and make sure that it is hot, make sure that somebody's not lying to them. So for me, you know, I'm gonna always say, hey, get an education. You know, that might sound cliche. Get an education. I tell my kids all the time, and that doesn't mean college. College ain't for everybody. You have awesome trade schools out there. You have awesome certifications you can get. We sent my son to
Public
trade
school.
school. We paid like $30,000 something for him to go to trade school. He's a certified mechanic. Uh, and what's crazy is while he was there, he got certifications in HVAC. He's making double the money doing HVAC than he was being a mechanic for 10 years. So it's the little things like that where it's like, man, I feel like I wasted my money then on this mechanic thing. You ain't even using it. He's like, but Dad, I doubled up. Like,
That's true.
I mean, he doubled up good enough that in 2 years he was able to buy a house now, right? And he wasn't able to back then, as a mechanic. So it's one of those things where definitely get an education, whatever that education may be. I try to tell kiddos now, try to think ahead. I know you're living in the moment, and usually, when you're young, that's what you do. It's day by day. You don't ever think about a year out, 3 years out, 5 years out.
No.
I'll be old then, right? But you have to, because without no future preparation, you're going to be hurting yourself when that time comes. And I don't want you to be behind the eight ball. I want you to be ahead of it. I want you to understand what you have to do now in order to be good in the future. I want kids to learn financial literacy, learn how to invest your money so your money is working for you. What do you do with your money, right? I remember when I was young, a bank. I used to think, well, banks will take your money. No, banks are there to secure your money. I remember walking around with tons of cash on me, right? You'll never find cash on me now.
Yeah.
And everything is on a card for me, and I love it like that. But, there's just little things like that if I was able to talk to somebody young, you need to start investing in yourself now. Don't wait. Do it now. And just trust me when I say that. But like I said, not all kiddos are gonna listen. I didn't listen. So
Yeah, some people do need to know it by touching the stove.
yes.
That's end my questions. Thank you for talking. I actually got to know you a little bit more better now. I actually enjoyed talking. It was so nice hearing about your stories, and this is actually very important for the public, and these are the small topics that we don't like to talk about, so I'm glad we are talking about it. Maybe if we can't help a lot of people, I hope this will help at least one person change their mind.
That's it. Reach one, teach one.
Yep.
Yes,
Reach
yes.
one, teach one. Oh, I like that. Thank you.
Thank you, PJ. Thank you.
Thank you. That was nice.
Oh.
Reach one, teach one. I like that.